Welcome to Lecture 16, Part 1, where we're going to talk about sexual economics theory, in particular research testing the tenets or the premises or assumptions of sexual economics theory, and that includes research that Terry Conley published in 2011. Let's start with a thought experiment. If a friend of yours was pondering whether to have casual sex, and the friend asked for your advice, should I or shouldn't I, would their gender matter to you? It does to a lot of people. In general, men receive far more encouraging sexual advice than women do, but let's take a moment to consider the reasons why. Consider which gender stands to gain more from the sexual double standard, which grants men far more sexual freedom than women. Now ask yourself, are men or women most responsible for the repression of female sexuality? If you say men, then it's a vote for male control theory, and if you say women, then it's a vote for female control theory. Baumeister and Twang pondered the reasons why female sexuality has been culturally repressed across time and cultures. They dismissed male control theory, which they rightly equate to patriarchy, because men are too eager for sex to suppress it in anyone, male or female. Instead, Baumeister and Twang entirely blamed women for repressing female sexuality. And that's female control theory in a nutshell. So why? What could possibly motivate women to suppress their own sexuality? The answer they came up with, they called sexual economics theory, according to which men and women operate in a marketplace in which women exchange sex for men's resources. That is, as they put it, women become the suppliers of sex, whereas men constitute the demand for it and play the role of purchasers and consumers. Sex isn't a mutually beneficial activity engaged in for pleasure or bonding. No, according to sexual economics theory, it's a supply contract. And as a result, it motivates women to restrict the supply of sex in order to keep the demand and price for it high. And how do women do that? According to Baumeister and Twang, slut shaming. Slut shaming serves to warn women not to have sex to begin with, and it stigmatizes women who don't heed the warning. SET argues that women engage in slut shaming because, quote, it is always within the best interests of a cartel to restrict the supply of its product, unquote. Thus, because women supposedly have more to gain than men from repressing female sexuality, it's women, not men, who are responsible for it, according to SET. Now, of course, women gossip about sex, but so do men, who may tag a woman as an easy lay while bragging about their sexual conquests. This type of locker room talk puts a target on a woman's back, placing her at risk for sexual exploitation. Why? Well, it's because too many men think that sexually experienced women are asking to be raped. At least that's the reason my mom gave to me when explaining why she had to warn me to be careful about boys. She felt bad about that. She was sex positive before feminists coined the term, meaning she liked sex and she wanted me to like sex. But maternal duty demanded that she warn me to be careful about boys while she was also giving me information about having sex. Contrast that with my dad, who was the sex police in the house, closely monitoring the length of my skirt and tossing boys out of the house if he suspected any monkey business. If my date and I were parked in the driveway after a night out, my dad made a big show of pacing back and forth in the living room picture window, flashing that porch light on and off to signal, I'd better get in now. Baumeister and Twang focus exclusively on how moms curtail female sexuality when giving their daughters sexual advice, but they completely ignore the role of dads, who are often so strict daughters don't dare to talk to them about sex. But my parents are just two people, so we need actual research that tests the tenets of SET. Fortunately, there's a lot of it, and not just from my own lab. In fact, the case against SET is so strong that I published a review paper laying it out in 2017. It's a Psychology of Women quarterly paper. Today, I'll summarize some of the main points in that article, the title of which is this: Myths of Sexual Economics Theory, Implications for Gender Equality and Heterosexual Relationships. And the picture is meant to denote that sexual economics theory is not only wrong, it's dangerous for women and it's dangerous for close relationships. It harms them. Okay, so what the paper explains is that SET is not only wrong, it has political costs for women's equality and interpersonal costs for men and women alike. So let's start with its implications for sexual equality, which is crucial for gender equality. By making the argument that only women are to blame for sexual inequality, SET is arguing, think about it, that women are more sexist than men. So that's the first myth. Women are more sexist than men? No. Around the world, men are more sexist than women. We've been finding this in the gender research literature ever since it started in the 1970s. So I just give one example. The co-author of your textbook, Peter Glick, has done research in 24 cultures, and he finds that men universally score higher on hostile sexism than women, and hostile sexism reflects resisting female empowerment, right? Whether politically, professionally, or within sexual relationships. So men's higher sexism and greater investment in patriarchy are scientific facts that Baumeister and Twang just completely ignore, and it's because they support male control theory. The second myth is that men like sex more than women. The principle of least interest is pivotal to SET. In order for women to use sex as a commodity to exchange it for men's resources, they have to be less enthused about it than men are. In any exchange, the party who is less eager can demand more for the transaction. That's the principle of least interest. And so it encourages women to withhold sex from men to get a better deal, as that old sexist saying that my grandmother used to say puts it, why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? So similarly, Baumeister and Twang theorized that women use sex to get something from men, and specifically money as well as commitment to the relationship. Baumeister and Twang relied on survey data to support the claim that men like sex more than women. But because the sexual double standard allows men to express their interest in sex more freely than women, self-reports are not trustworthy. The SDS virtually guarantees that men will outscore women on any measure of sexual enthusiasm. If Baumeister and Twang had included research using implicit measures, which cannot be controlled, they would have had to walk back their claims. Specifically, women and men show similarly robust liking for sex using the implicit association test and other types of implicit measures. So we find no sex differences in liking for sex when people's responses can't be faked or subject to social desirability concerns as a result of the sexual double standard. Also, when you just sit back and think about things, consider women's enthusiastic adoption of the pill, for example, or how feminists were cheerleading the sexual revolution. If you consider those things, it's rather obvious that women like sex for the sake of pleasure just as much as men do. But Baumeister is an evolutionary psychologist, so he believes their story that men want more sex than women for evolutionarily adaptive reasons, and nothing society can do will change that because it's essential to men's nature. So according to evolutionary psychology, biology drives men to be less choosy than women about their sexual partners. Men need many babies because of paternity uncertainty. The more babies they have, the more they up their chances of fathering at least one, while women need reliable men with resources to act as fathers for their kids, right? That's evolutionary psychology's explanation for sex differences in enthusiasm for sex. So Terry Conley tested that explanation for why, for example, 75% of men and absolutely no women accepted casual sex offers from strangers in Clark and Hatfield's field study published in 1989. That's a study that's crucial to evolutionary psychology's argument about why men and women have different sexual strategies. And if you remember, Clark and Hatfield had Confederates, male and female Confederates, who had been deemed attractive before they were recruited to do the research. They had them walk up to either men or women on campus at the University of Florida and say, I've been watching you for some time now. I find you attractive. Would you like to have sex with me tonight? 75% of men said yes to a female stranger, and 0 women said yes to a male stranger. Now, Clark and Hatfield carefully explained why they didn't know why they found such a large gender gap, right? They did the study, but they didn't test mechanisms. So when they discussed their findings, they included the sexual double standard and women's safety concerns as strong possibilities. Women who have casual sex with strangers can be stigmatized as a slut or even at risk for being raped by a pervert. Well, Conley knows that they added this information to their general discussion, and she adds that besides stigma and danger, there's also a gender pleasure gap. It's just easier for men to orgasm with novel partners. Therefore, men are more eager to have casual sex because when you put stigma, danger, and pleasure together, men can be pretty much guaranteed of having a risk-free, pleasurable experience, and that's just not true for women. So Conley points out that when men are approached by a stranger, that stranger is female, whereas for women, the stranger is male. And therein lies the answer to why men more eagerly jump into bed with strangers than women do. The gender of the initiator best explains why men are more likely than women to accept casual sex offers. For women, trust issues are huge, and they are rightly wary of strange men. But if you eliminate the danger gap, you eliminate the sex difference that evolutionary psychologists claim is universal. For example, Conley found no gender differences when people imagined being approached by their best friend of the other gender to have casual sex. Both men and women were similarly eager to have sex with their best friend. In addition, Conley found no gender differences in people's willingness to go to bed with attractive celebrities. So men were just as likely to want to go to bed with Angelina Jolie as women were likely to go to bed with Johnny Depp. And then conversely, sex differences vanished when people considered casual sex offers from unattractive celebrities. And she used Donald Trump, for example, for women and Roseanne Barr for men. So in this case, neither gender wanted to go to bed with unattractive celebrities. Further, When Conley asked lesbians and gay men to imagine being approached by attractive same-sex strangers for casual sex, once again, she found no gender differences in acceptance rates, right? But lesbians are being approached by female strangers and gay men are being approached by male strangers, right? And then when you have that situation, there's no gender difference in acceptance of casual sex offers. And then finally, bisexual women were more eager to accept an offer of casual sex from a female as compared with a male stranger. Last but not least, Conley directly tested whether evolutionary psychology is correct at all in its predictions. And if that's true, then men should be more eager to have sex with a faithful woman compared to an unfaithful woman, thanks to paternity uncertainty. And women should be more eager to have sex with a wealthy male stranger compared with a poor one, because women need men's resources. However, Conley found that those variables had no impact on sexual decision-making for either men or women, suggesting that the genders are not, quote, designed differently, unquote, by evolution when it comes to sexual strategies. Instead, women are seen as more trustworthy than men when it comes to sexual proposals. Conley's conclusion contains these two statements. Women are clearly not universally driven to accept casual sex less frequently than men, but offers from male strangers do appear to be less appealing than offers from other types of people, like female strangers. Thus, we can assume that gender differences in acceptance of casual sex would narrow or disappear if anticipated safety and sexual pleasure in the encounter was the same for men and women. So Conley's research systematically debunked evolutionary psychology's explanation for why men appear to be more enthusiastic about sex than women because they tend to accept casual sex offers more often. It's so systematic that I hold it up as an ideal for my graduate students. Say, you really want to get after a question, here's a way to do it in a systematic way. And her general discussion alone is worth the price of admission for how she takes us through evolutionary psychology's arguments and then point by point rebuts them. Nonetheless, there's a limitation to her approach when you compare it directly with Clark and Hatfield's now famous or infamous field study. What's the problem? Well, participants in Conley's research are asked to report what they would do if they were approached by strangers for casual sex, or what they had done when they were offered casual sex in the past, rather than observing what they actually do when they're approached for casual sex. So what we really need is a study that measures actual behavior, like Clark and Hatfield's field study, while also removing the danger gap. And we have that study. Inspired by Conley, German researchers recruited women and men for a dating study that required them to send a photo weeks in advance to the experimenters. This is a study by Baranowski and Hecht, which was published in 2012. Once participants were in the lab, they were given 10 photos of seemingly other participants. In fact, they were made up. But they were told that these are the other participants who are interested in having sex with you. Would you accept or decline an offer of having sex with them? So how are they going to remove the danger gap? What they did is they said, if you agree to have sex with any of the 10 people in the photos, we, the researchers, will provide the location and will film the first 30 minutes of your encounter with the person. And then, if everything seems like, we're all on board here, we'll leave you alone so that you can have sex together. So, in other words, the researchers would provide a safe space for the meeting to take place, and they'd be able to screen out for creepers. What they found is that 100% of the men and 97% of the women agreed to have sex with at least one person, which did not differ. So it shows you how important risk factors are when it comes to women's sexual decision making. You might be thinking, I wonder if German women are like more sexually liberal. The answer is no, because Baranowski and Hecht replicated Clark and Hatfield's findings when they did a field study in Germany using the same method, strangers approaching men and women with a sexual offer. So just like Clark and Hatfield found, a lot more men than women were interested in having sex with a stranger in the field study. But of course, the danger factor in that case is going to loom large for women. So I think we can say that the gender gap in accepting offers of casual sex found in studies like Clark and Hatfield's is likely to be driven by risk factors, not biologically evolved gender differences as evolutionary psychology would have it, and as Roy Baumeister also assumes. So this matters for sexual economics theory because Baumeister and Twang use evolutionary psychology to argue that men are more eager for sex than women. But is that really true? When we consider the German study with Terry Conley's work and the implicit attitude research, it starts to look like a myth.